Ceramics illustrates a strong link between science and art. It has been described as the artistic expression of the geology of the earth. For my creative project, I'd like to bring you into the world of ceramics as it relates to geology. The most common process of clay formation is when rocks that have the mineral feldspar undergo chemical weathering called hydrolysis. This natural conversion process occurs over time as the slight acidity of rain leads to erosion. Feldspar and water and carbon dioxide convert into kaolinite, a clay mineral and the primary component of clay. Clays can also contain some quartz, mica, calcite, and iron oxides, all of which can affect the quality and color of the ceramic end product. Variations in mineral content also affect color, strength, texture, and firing temperature. There are two general types of clay deposits: residual or primary clay deposits, which remain at the site in which they were formed, and secondary clay deposits, which have been transported from their original location by water erosion. In nature, compacted clay layers can become shale, and under intense heat and pressure, that shale may then metamorphose into slate. Clay is the finest grade of clastic sedimentary particles derived from rock weathering. These particles of clay, referred to as clasts, are tiny flat flakes which give clay a sheet-like mineral structure. When moisture is added to dry clay, the water molecules integrate themselves into the crystal lattice structure of the clay. This causes the clay body to expand up to 2 times in size, and sometimes with great force. Clay becomes plastic and malleable when wet, and shrinks and becomes brittle when water is removed. When appropriately heated, clay can become very hard and even waterproof. Pottery is made by forming a clay body into objects of a desired shape and design, then heating them to high temperatures in a kiln, which removes all the water from the clay body and induces reactions that increase the strength, reduce water permeability, and sets the pot in its shape. There are 3 general types of fired pottery. Earthenware, which is fired at cone 04, is a relatively low temperature of 1,950 degrees Fahrenheit. In this case, the clay body ends up being porous and not watertight unless a glaze is used. Stoneware is fired at cone 10, which is around 2,380 degrees Fahrenheit, and will reach full or partial vitrification. Glaze is not essential, but is often used. Stoneware pots are able to hold water, and they are stronger than earthenware and less likely to chip. In the production of ceramics, vitrification is responsible for a pot's impermeability to water. Porcelain is the purest, least malleable, and whitest form of clay, and can be fired at cone 14, which is a high temperature of around 2,552 degrees Fahrenheit. It becomes smooth, strong, and durable as it reaches complete vitrification. Industrial ceramics are typically fired at mid-range temperature, somewhere between earthenware and stoneware. Potters will sometimes add a small amount of pulverized, pre-fired clay, or grog, into the clay body. This makes the clay more gritty, reduces shrinkage, and strengthens and stabilizes the clay. It is natural for clay to reduce in size due to the removal of water, although the amount of shrinkage varies. A good stoneware clay body is around 70% silica and alumina and is expected to shrink 12 to 15%. Kneading or wedging the clay prior to shaping it helps to ensure an even consistency and moisture content, as well as to remove air bubbles that might be trapped within the clay body. Clay can be hand-built in coils, flat slabs, thrown on a potter's wheel, or poured into a mold. Any pottery that has not yet been fired is considered greenware, and even after it has dried, can easily be returned to its original consistency with the addition of water. In its ideal plastic and malleable hydration level, clay is very soft and moist. When a piece of pottery has dried out enough to become stiff, but still retains some moisture and is only slightly pliable, it is considered leather hard. This is the ideal consistency for trimming the bottom or foot of a pot or to attach handles. Once it has dried completely and is no longer cool to the touch, it is bone dry. This is a very delicate stage, as the greenware can easily be broken or cracked. Next, the pieces are bisque fired in a gas or electric kiln to cone 04, which is considered a low temperature at around 1,950 degrees Fahrenheit. This will drive out any residual water, and while the pieces will be porous and readily absorb liquid, they are now stronger than greenware. As such, they are now considered earthenware. Glazing is the next stage in the process and essentially involves putting a thin coating of glass on the pot. Glazes usually consist of three primary components: glass formers, like silica, which have a very high melting temperature, fluxes, such as sodium, which aid in getting the glass formers to flow or melt at a lower temperature, and stabilizers, which reduce that flow. Coloring pigments derived from metals such as copper, iron, cobalt, rutile, or manganese can also be added. Glazes can be applied in several ways, but typically the very finely powdered glaze mix is held in a suspension of water and applied by dipping, pouring, painting, or spraying onto the bisque pot. And finally, stoneware pots return to the kiln once more to be fired at cone 9, which is a high temperature of around 2,345 degrees Fahrenheit. This is when the glaze adheres to the clay body and they both vitrify, becoming glass-like. As I was inspired to combine both geology and ceramics, I decided to make a rectangular vase, imitating steep rocky cliff sides, and I went ahead and added a bunch of silly little goats climbing all over it. Pretty cute, I know. I used a white clay body called B-Mix, and after drying and bisque firing, I applied an iron oxide wash on the cliff's face and a black oxide wash on the goats. I then used wax resist to keep the goats as they were, but used a spray gun to apply a thin coat of yellow salt glaze to the cliff sides.